Hi kids, these are the notes on repetition. Repetition is a literary device, like figurative language, imagery, and metaphor. So repetition is what you have when an author is obviously repeating something in a way that is noticeable. In other words, if an author is using the word the or a or an multiple times, that's not noticeably repeating something in a way that the reader would say, oh, she's repeating that, because we all have to use the words an and a and the often, right? So what you're looking for instead is words or lines that stand out because they're not words or lines the author necessarily had to repeat. A reader would easily notice this word or this line is being repeated. There are two main reasons that authors repeat things in literature. And the first one is like the reason that we repeat things in real life. Sometimes the author is saying, this is important. This is important. So when an author is repeating something to say it's important, they want you to stop and think about this repeated word or phrase, how is this a core idea or a core feeling in this piece? Like, how is this at the heart of what the piece is about? So sometimes the author is saying when she repeats something, this means two different things. And I'm going to add here, this one only applies when the author says something exactly twice. I'll show you an example of that first one. So two different things. That's a reason that an author could be saying something exactly twice. She might be hinting that it has a surface meaning or a deeper meaning. Let me just add, you may remember from metaphor that an author would use a literary device sometimes because it would add a couple different good things to their writing. Repetition is naturally beautiful. Human beings love repetition. It's why songs have choruses. It's why there are patterns on our wallpaper. The human brain likes to see things be repeated and likes to hear things be repeated. So anytime an author adds repetition to writing, it adds beauty. It makes it more beautiful. So in addition to having the effect of the author signaling to you this is important, or this thing that I say exactly twice means two different things, the author is also making the piece more beautiful. And if you're asking yourself, well, which of the qualities of literature does that support? Beautiful writing is emotionally moving writing. The response that you have to a beautiful thing is an emotional response. So here's my poem Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening that I keep talking about by Robert Frost. You've read it a few times at this point. It's got 4 stanzas. Here's the 3rd stanza. Here's the 4th stanza. This poem is famous for its repetition in the 4th and last stanza. So he's riding his horse home or possibly being pulled by it. He stops in the forest all alone. He's looking at the woods in the distance filling up with snow. And then here in the last stanza, he says, the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I've promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. So if I'm a student of literature, if I'm a student of literary analysis, and I'm asking myself, is he repeating this because he's saying it's important, or is he repeating it because it means two different things? I'm going to test each of those and see which one makes more sense. So does it make sense that he's saying this is important? Like, does it make sense in this poem that the author, Robert Frost, might be saying to himself, it's really important that my readers understand that my house is a really long way? That seems kind of dumb, right? That doesn't seem like a timeless, deeper meaning, right? But could it mean, is he saying it exactly twice, and could it mean two different things? Well, let's find out. I mean, we know it has a surface meaning. It means he has a long way to go before he gets home. But could it like have a deeper meaning? You don't have to think about this poem too long to decide that the answer to that is yes. And here's what leads me to that as a reader. I know that he's on a road, right? And I think, well, okay, that could be a metaphor for the road of life, right? That's a metaphor people use a lot. It's a cliche, actually. I know that sleep is also sometimes a metaphor for death, like it's a cliche as well. Sometimes we say sleep when we mean die, right? So maybe miles to go on the road before he sleeps, quote unquote, means he has a long life to live yet before he's ready to quit, before he's ready to die. Um, and if I ask myself, does that make sense with the rest of the poem? It's the darkest evening of the year. He's between the woods and the frozen lake. He wants to stop, but he has to keep going. Yeah, it does make sense. It's like he's stopping on the road of life. He's all alone. He wants to lay down and die, but he still has miles, quote unquote, to go, like a lot of life left to live before he, quote unquote, sleeps, i.e., dies, right? So in this case, this is an example of an author repeating something, saying it exactly twice because he's saying it means two different things. I'll show you another example of repetition where the author's doing it not for this reason, come on, not for this reason, but for this reason, saying this is important. This is the poem We Real Cool by Gwendolyn Brooks. Gwendolyn Brooks was an African-American poet writing in the 20th century, and I believe she wrote this poem in the 1970s. She said in an interview that she was walking home one day and she passed a pool hall, a place where people play pool, you know. And she saw a bunch of teenage boys in there playing pool. And it was the middle of a school day. And she said to herself, why are they in there playing pool? And she wondered what they would say if they were asked that question. And then she wrote this poem as an answer, like what she imagines they would say. So it's called We Real Cool. It has a subtitle, The Pool Players, 7 at the Golden Shovel, which the reader can interpret to mean, you know, this is a poem about pool players, 7 people at a place called the Golden Shovel. That's the name of the pool hall. So here's this very, very simple 8-line poem. We real cool. We left school. We lurk late. We strike straight. We sing sin. We thin gin. We jazz June. We die soon. I put it in bold, but I don't think you need me to put it in bold to notice how many times she says we. It really, really stands out, right? So as the reader, you know, there they all are, you know that it's intentional. When I said at the beginning of these notes, repetition in writing is the author is saying something over and over and it sticks out to you. They don't have to do it, but they're doing it anyway. Here it stands out like, wow, she's saying we a lot. So we're going to ask ourselves why. It's not the case that she's saying we means two different things because she says it like, you know, how many times? 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 if you count the title, right? So instead, it has to be that she's saying this is important. So then to interpret it, we say to ourselves, what does this word, or if it were a different poem, maybe this line, mean? And how would that be at the heart of this poem? So we're going to say, what does we mean? And how is we at the heart of this poem? So we means like a group, right? All of us, not just one person, but several. So then we need to ask the question, well, how is being in a group at the heart of this poem? And in literature, unlike in math, there are many possible right answers. It's not the case that there's exactly one right answer and you either get it or you don't. There are many possible right answers, and whether you get it or not just depends on how convincing your argument is, really. So the argument that I think we could make here, that I think is pretty convincing, is that we means a group, and the way that being in a group is at the heart of this poem is that these boys who are, you know, dropouts, who think they're bad butts, they hang out late at night being scary, they attack people, they celebrate naughtiness, they drink alcohol, They party like there's no tomorrow. And then, oh, by the way, they believe that they have no future and that they're going to die young. These boys, what they have is each other. They, like, we could infer perhaps that that's all they have. Because, using what we know about why kids might act this way, it's not kids who have, beautiful futures and happy homes and happy school lives who do this kind of stuff, right? It's kids who don't have any of that. And if we know additionally, if we did a little author research and we know that Gwendolyn Brooks is an African American poet who often writes about African American issues in America in the 20th century, we don't have to make a big leap to think, well, maybe this is partly about racism too, and about growing up Black in America and feeling like your future doesn't offer many opportunities for you. So maybe the we here is all these boys have is each other. They don't feel like they have any other thing. So that is what drives them to do the things that they do, because it's part of them bonding together as a group. It's part of them celebrating the one thing that they have that's important to them, which is their gang, right? It's kind of like a gang she's describing. They are violent and they break laws, they're naughty. So we could say it a couple different ways, but like that, I think, is a reasonable interpretation of why she's saying we over and over. Now, this section of these notes is instructions for what to do if you think there may be repetition in your poem, but you're not sure. If you're not sure, but you think there might be, go to this word cloud generator and follow these instructions. Paste the whole poem, click generate, then click size, and then you're going to see vary word size with, and next to that, click frequency, and then click regenerate. When you do all this, when you do these steps, you're going to see all the words in your poem, and the ones that appear more than once are going to be the biggest. If you choose to vary word size with frequency, you're going to see the words in your poem that appear the most often as the biggest words. So that could help you see what are some frequently repeated words in your poem. And if it's several words that appear together, it's probably a repeated line. It could also be the case that there's obvious repetition in your poem and you don't need to use the word cloud generator to help you find it. And it could be the case that there's no repetition in your poem. If that third one is true, then of course you're going to do a class set poem. Now, today's note-taking grid instructions are a little different than what they normally are. The evidence box is the same, but the template for the feeling box is a little different. So in your note-taking grid, do your evidence box the way you normally would. So paste the lines that have repetition in quote marks. Well, I'm going to change that to formatted correctly, right? Because if it's 4 or more lines, we don't use quote marks. And then you're going to do one of the sentence templates that I include here. So these are a little different from the normal feeling box sentence templates. These are new feeling sentence templates. I changed them a little bit because the normal feeling sentence template doesn't exactly work. Like this repetition makes the reader feel. I'm giving you 2 more specific templates to choose from. So the first one is the template you would choose if you think the repetition in your poem has 2 different meanings. And you would write, this repetition expresses different meanings. And then in the first blank, you'd put the surface meaning. And in the second blank, you'd put a second meaning, and you'd put an abstract noun in there. So here's an example of me doing this one for Robert Frost's poem, where he says, miles to go before I sleep, right? This repetition expresses different meanings. So surface meaning, that the speaker has a long way to go before he goes to bed, and that the speaker has a lot of responsibilities left in his life. So you're going to do this first sentence template if you think your repetition is the author expressing a surface meaning and a deeper meaning. If you think your author is using repetition to say, hey, pay special attention to this idea that's at the heart of the poem, you're going to use this template. This repetition makes the reader pay special attention to, and then in here you'll put some idea that has an abstract noun in it, or you could put a couple abstract nouns. So for me, for my Gwendolyn Brooks poem, We Real Cool, I wrote, this repetition makes the reader pay special attention to the idea of people belonging to a group. So here I've got belonging as an abstract noun, although I'm using it like as a verb there. All right, frequently asked questions about the repetition row. The main thing kids want to know is when they quote the section of the poem that's being repeated, how do they quote it? You only have to quote it once, but you give all of the lines where it appears. In other words, if I'm quoting "and miles to go before I sleep," I'm going to write it like this. My evidence box will look like this. I will put "and miles to go before I sleep" in quotes. I'm only going to write it once, but I'm going to say lines 15-16. So I'm going to put both of the lines it appears, even though I'm only writing the repeated part once. And if I were doing Gwendolyn Brooks' poem, I would do we, and I would say, I feel like it should be lines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Because if I just write lines, I mean, it's in every line, right? No, it's actually not in the 8th line. It's in lines 1 through 7. Because if I write lines 1 through 7, it doesn't give, it doesn't really communicate exactly how many times it appears. But actually, this might be correct too. I'm not sure. Anyway, the point is, you just have to put the repeated part once, but you do have to put all the lines where it appears. All right, that's it. If you have questions while you're doing this, please come and ask me.